I was born with it. A dark, sprawling mark that swallowed half of my left cheek, as though the universe had branded me at birth. The midwife whispered that it was unlucky. My mother's eyes went cold the moment she saw me, and my father didn't even glance at me before turning away. From the very beginning, I learned something crucial. Love was a luxury I would never be afforded. Childhood was a battlefield, and my home, a prison. My siblings, 3 of them, all perfect in their fair-skinned, freckleless glory, learned quickly that I was to be avoided, mocked, punished. My mother would snap at me for the smallest things, her words sharp enough to draw a dagger at my soul. "Why can't you just be normal?" she'd hiss. My father's punishment was quieter, colder. He'd stare for long stretches, measuring, judging, reminding me without words that I didn't belong. People looked. They couldn't stop themselves. Not just at the mark, but at me. At the way I carried myself despite the hatred. At the quiet that had settled in my eyes. At the fire that simmered beneath the surface. It was when I was 12 that I first realized power didn't have to come from approval or love. It could come from fear. Her name was Alara. She was a neighbor, older than me by 3 years, with hair the color of burnt honey and eyes like polished amber. Most children ran from me, but Alara, she didn't flinch. She smiled. Not at the mark, not at me, but with me. She whispered things to me in the garden behind her house, words I didn't fully understand, but that planted a seed of something I hadn't felt before. Possibility. "You're different," she said one afternoon, the sun falling across her freckled face like scattered coins. "Don't let them fool you into thinking it's a curse. It's power." Power. The word felt scary and thrilling in my mouth. I didn't know how to wield it yet, but I wanted it. And slowly, oh, so slowly, I began to learn. Adulthood didn't soften the hatred. It sharpened it. My mother's sighs when she saw me, my father's judgmental smirks at family gatherings, the whispered taunts of cousins, all became fuel. I learned to vanish into shadows, to move unseen, to watch and memorize. I learned patience, and I learned that the people who hurt me most were also the ones I could turn into instruments of my revenge, if I was clever enough. It all began with a letter. A simple, unsigned envelope slid under my apartment door at 2 a.m., the kind of thing that makes your heart stop, and then pound like a drum of war. Inside, a single sentence. "They think you're powerless. Show them what they've created." I didn't sleep that night. I traced the dark mark on my face in the mirror and smiled faintly. The fire Alara had sparked so many years ago now roared into something unstoppable. And I realized I was ready. Ready to step out of the shadows. Ready to make them regret every word, every look, every ounce of hatred they had poured into me. But I had no idea just how far I would have to go. Morning came gray and silent. I lingered by the window, the city's muted hum beneath me. The letter sat on my kitchen counter, innocuous, but it burned in my mind. I didn't recognize the handwriting. No stamp, no mark of origin. Whoever it was, they knew me. Not my mark, not my scars. Me. I moved carefully, almost instinctively, like a predator learning the layout of a new hunting ground. Each step in my apartment was deliberate. I scanned the corners, the mirrors, the shadows. The city felt different that morning, sharper somehow, like it had been holding its breath, waiting. That evening, the bell rang. Not the casual ding of a neighbor, but the low, deliberate buzz of a delivery. I hesitated. It was a plain black envelope this time, unmarked except for my name written in neat, unhurried letters. My fingers shook as I picked it up. Inside, folded neatly, was a small card. "They are ready to see the consequences of their choices. Are you?" I froze. Who knew about them? About the family? About all those years of silent suffering? And then a thought, terrifying and thrilling, struck me. What if this wasn't just a message? What if it was a plan? The next day, I went out under the pretense of errands. I wanted to move among the city crowds, to feel invisible while sharpening the awareness that had been drilled into me since childhood. And that's when I first saw him. He was seated at a small cafe, alone, watching me. Dark hair, sharp features, piercing gray eyes. Not threatening, at least not in a way you notice immediately. But something about his gaze made me aware, like he could see straight into the part of me the world had tried to erase. He smiled briefly, and then returned to his coffee. My pulse quickened. My instincts screamed at me to keep walking, to ignore him. But curiosity, that scary, irresistible curiosity, anchored me in place. "You're expecting something," he said without moving his lips. Not a question, but an observation, a statement that left me both unnerved and intrigued. I realized with a jolt that the fire I'd nurtured since childhood wasn't mine alone. Whoever this man was, he understood power, and he might just become a key to the plan that the letter had ignited. That night, I traced my mark in the mirror again. The shadows of the room seemed to bend closer, waiting for me to step out, to stop hiding, to become something they could never ignore. And I promised myself, they will see me, all of me, and they will regret every single day they tried to make me less. As I laid in my bed, I found myself thinking about the man at the cafe. Marcus. I had heard someone mutter his name somewhere in passing, though I didn't know if it was truth or rumor. Something about him had unsettled me. The way he seemed to see through everything, yet say nothing. The next morning, I received another note, this time slipped under my apartment door with the same precision as the first. "If you want to turn the fire into power, meet me tonight. Alone. Midnight. Rooftop, 17th Street. Alone. Midnight. My pulse quickened. I didn't hesitate. I never hesitated anymore. The rooftop was hidden behind a narrow alley. By the time I climbed the final rung of the fire escape, the city below was a glittering web of light, distant and insignificant. He was already there, leaning against the low parapet, hands tucked in his coat pockets, eyes reflecting the scattered lights of the city like some predator in waiting. "You came," he said, voice low, smooth, carrying a weight I didn't yet understand. Not a question. An observation. "I'm done hiding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He studied me for a long moment, and I realized he wasn't evaluating my words. He was measuring me. "Good," he finally said. "Most people like you. They run. You don't." I shivered, though I didn't know if it was cold or something else. There was something scary and precise about him, something that made my instincts buzz with both fear and anticipation. "My name is Marcus," he said, "and I can teach you things your parents never could, things that will make them, everyone who ever doubted you, regret it. But it comes at a cost. Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer immediately. I let the wind whip around us, the city lights flickering across the rooftop, shadows twisting across his face. I could feel the possibility of power, sharp and tangible, hanging in the air between us. "I'm ready," I said finally. Not because I knew what it meant, but because I had already spent my life preparing for this moment. He nodded once, sharply. "Then we begin." I didn't know how it would unfold, only that from this night onward, I would never be the invisible girl again. Every insult, every look of disgust, every whispered joke from my family, they would all be accounted for. Slowly, carefully, methodically. The plan would not be obvious. It would not be cruel for cruelty's sake. It would be precise. And while Marcus spoke in clipped instructions about observation, timing, patience, and control, I realized this was more than training. This was a promise that one day the world, and the people who had tried to erase me, would see me, all of me, and regret underestimating the fire inside. The city spread below us, indifferent, unaware. But up here, on the rooftop, in the wind and shadows, I felt the first stirrings of something I had never felt before: control, power, possibility, and I would wield it. The days after the rooftop meeting passed in a strange haze. By day, I moved like a ghost through the city, blending in, invisible to everyone who might have recognized me before. By night, I returned to my apartment, spreading maps, notebooks, and scraps of information across my table. Marcus's words replayed in my head: observe, learn, wait. Patience is power. I began with my family, my parents, my siblings. They had thought I would disappear quietly into the shadows of their perfect lives. They had underestimated how much I had absorbed: every insult, every sharp glance, every silent punishment. They were all catalogued, filed away in my memory. I started watching. First, from a distance. My mother walking through the local market, her movements deliberate but predictable. My father at the office, surrounded by people who flattered him and never challenged him. My siblings, careless, arrogant, always sure of their superiority. Each one had a rhythm. Each one had a weakness, even if it was small. At night, Marcus would call, or sometimes appear silently at my door, to review the day's observations. He never gave instructions outright. He guided, questioned, and tested. "Why do you think your mother insists on perfection?" he asked one evening, leaning against the doorway like a shadow. "What does she fear more than anything?" I paused, considering. "That people will see me, and she will look weak." "Exactly," he said, voice low. "And weakness is always exploitable." It wasn't cruelty he taught me. It was control, precision, patience. Observation was power. And I was learning faster than even I realized. One night, I noticed my sister, confident, careless, laughing at a call from her friends, leaving her apartment door slightly ajar. My mother, too, left notes scattered on her kitchen counter, confidential bills and letters carelessly placed. My father's office schedule was posted in the lobby where anyone could see. The tiniest cracks, the smallest openings, and all of them were visible to me now. I began leaving subtle marks of my presence. A shadow in the corner when my sister thought she was alone. A misplaced envelope in my mother's kitchen. A faint, deliberate misplacement of papers in my father's office building. Nothing dangerous, nothing traceable, just reminders. And every time, I watched them react, from a distance, unseen. Their irritation, their confusion, it was intoxicating. Small, almost imperceptible tremors in the world they thought they controlled. It was the first taste of power, and it was addictive. Marcus observed silently, approving. "Patience," he reminded me one night. "A fire burns fastest when it is fed slowly." I traced my mark in the mirror again, running my fingers over it. It had been a curse once, in the eyes of the world. But now, it felt like a brand of destiny, a signal that I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. And soon, those who had hurt me would see me. I didn't want to unsettle them anymore. I wanted them to feel me. Marcus had warned me, not with fear, but with honesty. "When you move," he said quietly one night, "don't move halfway. Half measures invite disrespect. Decide what you want them to lose, then take it." That was the moment I understood. Revenge wasn't noise. Revenge was exposure. I started with the one thing my parents worshipped more than perfection: their reputation. My mother lived for admiration, for praise, for being seen as the flawless woman who raised a flawless family. I knew her schedule. I knew her circles. I knew exactly where her mask mattered most. So I made sure it slipped. At her charity event, the one she had prepared for weeks, I showed up. Not late, not hidden, not apologetic. The night had been polished to perfection, the kind of night my mother had spent months planning, every detail meant to reflect her flawless image. Candles gleamed, crystal chandeliers sparkled, guests murmured polite compliments. My family moved through it all, convinced they controlled the narrative. I entered quietly, but I entered with certainty. My dress was magenta velvet, elegant, understated but commanding. The mark on my face was visible, unhidden, and for the first time, I let it announce me. My hair framed my face loosely, giving me an aura of calm authority. I didn't flinch. I didn't hide. And then, I saw him, Marcus. He wasn't just standing in the corner. He was the center of subtle attention, the kind of high-profile figure even my parents would hesitate to offend. His gaze met mine briefly, a small nod, and I felt the silent encouragement behind it. No words, no interference, just pride. The whispers started almost immediately. I could feel them, sliding through the room like a cold wind. Guests noticed me first, my confidence, the elegance, the air of someone who no longer asked for permission to exist. Then my mother, frozen mid-step, realizing she couldn't ignore me, approached the podium where my mother had rehearsed her welcome speech, all smiles and poised charm. She stiffened as I stopped beside her. No confrontation, no loud declarations, just presence. The kind of presence that demands recognition. "Mother?" I said softly, clear enough for the nearest guests to hear. She turned, her eyes wide, every calculated social mask cracking. "Yes?" she said, voice tight. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the tension roll through the room. "I've spent my life learning what it means to be overlooked," I said, calm, deliberate. "To be ignored, to be made less than I am, by the people who should have loved me most." The room stiffened. Whispers buzzed. Every head turned. "I've learned," I continued, "that perfection is often built on the backs of those we try to hide. And I've spent years waiting, watching, learning. Tonight, I'm not hiding anymore." My father's jaw tightened. My siblings shifted uncomfortably. My mother's composure faltered in a way I had never seen, and the guests noticed it too. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg for attention. I exposed their arrogance and neglect by simply existing, by commanding the room with my dignity, my calm authority, and the subtle weight of someone who had nothing left to prove, but everything to teach. Marcus watched silently, leaning lightly against a column. He didn't intervene, but the way he held himself told the room that he approved, that my presence carried weight. The kind of weight even my parents could not contest in polite society. His quiet, unyielding pride made my performance sharper, my confidence more daring. By the end of the evening, my family was fractured in the eyes of everyone present. Their careful social armor, built over decades, had been shaken in a single, quiet display of control. They couldn't confront me. They couldn't ignore me. They could only feel the full scope of what they had done, and how powerless they were to contain it. I left the podium with calm certainty, passing Marcus briefly. His eyes met mine just for a moment. No words were spoken, but his silent approval told me I had passed the first test. I had claimed my power without a single misstep. The mark on my face no longer felt like a curse. It was my signature, a declaration of who I had become, unstoppable, seen, and untouchable. And my family, who had spent a lifetime trying to erase me, had no choice but to watch and remember that night forever. That night, after the last guest had gone and the chandeliers dimmed to a tired glow, a letter was slipped beneath my door. No knock, no name, just a single sheet of thick paper. I will be back soon. Wait for me. It will be final. I read it over and over, my fingers trembling, not with fear, but with certainty. I waited. That same afternoon, a delivery arrived. A dress, handcrafted, regal, unmistakably chosen with intention. No note, no explanation. I didn't need one. Marcus. Later that evening, I overheard my parents speaking in hushed excitement. They too had been invited. They called it the Queen's coronation. Their voices carried pride, ambition, everything they had never offered me. They left before I did. I arrived later. The palace gates opened for me without question. The guards bowed slightly as they escorted me inside. The hall was vast, glowing with candlelight and quiet power. Conversations stilled as I passed. I felt eyes on me, curious, uncertain, unsettled. The king walked in, and my breath caught. It was Marcus. Not the quiet man from the cafe. Not the observer in the shadows. He was dressed magnificently, commanding the room without effort, his presence undeniable. The hall fell silent. He spoke. He told them how he had walked among them unseen for years, how he had watched, how he had waited, how he had protected what mattered most without ever interfering. Then he turned to me. He spoke of my strength, my endurance, my beauty, unhidden, undeniable. He declared me his queen. I was shocked. I thought he pitied me. I thought he was just helping me. The shock rippled through the hall like thunder. My parents froze, their carefully built world collapsing in real time. My siblings stared, jealousy sharp in their eyes. The guests whispered, stunned, unable to reconcile the girl they had ignored with the woman now, standing crowned in truth. I turned sharply, my gaze locking with his. Those calm gray eyes that had seen me long before the world did. Would you do me the honor of a dance? In one breath, I scanned the hall. I saw my parents, my sisters, my cousins. Every face that had once dismissed me now watched in silence. I looked back at him, and I placed my hand in his. He guided me to the center of the floor as a slow song began. His hand rested firmly at my back, steady, protective, grounding. As we moved, he leaned close, his voice low and soothing. You walked into this hall with your head high, he said. That is power. He told me never to hide again, never to shrink, never to doubt what I had survived. You are beautiful, he said. You are strong. You are already everything they feared you could become. As we danced, I understood something at last. The mark on my face had never been my curse. It was my crown.